We're going to call the Facilities and Operations meeting to order. We're running a little late, but the goal is still to get out of here by 5:30, hour and a half, right?
I have to leave at 5, but I'll get on the phone.
Okay, so now we got to do it by 5. Okay.
No, you keep going. I'll just be up there. Hour's fine.
Okay, so let's do quick introductions. We'll start on my far left.
You call me far left?
Yeah.
I am David Main. I'm the communications manager for the bond.
Natasha Granis, project manager, office of operations. Sorry, Natasha Garcia.
Felicidades!
Hey!
Oh!
Her.
Oh, gotcha!
Felicidades!
You should have said something, because I would have been like Hollins. Awesome, awesome.
This isn't awkward for me at all.
I'm Teresa Fagan. I'm project manager in facilities, and I'll be one of the project managers working on the Tubman.
Awesome.
Scott Johnson, Seabury Gary, and I'm going to be joining the Tubman project as well.
Awesome.
Camille Idarovo, Innovation Studio, project lead for Center for Black Students.
Jonathan Garcia, Chief of Staff.
Terry Brady, Director of Student Transportation.
Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer.
Lisa Wheeler, Transportation Routing Manager of Student Transportation.
Patrick Legoff, Director of Projects and Construction Facilities.
Dana White, Director of Planning and Real Estate.
Gary Hollins, I am the chair of the Facilities Operations Committee.
Amy Constam, Board Director.
Roseanne Powell, Board Manager.
Yes. Senior Bonus Large, Contracted General Counsel.
Dr. Cheryl Proctor, Deputy Superintendent of Instruction and School Communities.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant in the Board Office.
Frank Adula, Communications.
Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we look like we have a couple things on the agenda. There's only 2, so it shouldn't be that long. So we will 3. You added 1?
The bond planning one. It should be quick though.
What was up at 2?
Supplemental transportation plan and then Tubman.
Gotcha, I didn't see that one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll let Dan take it away.
And did we have a request to change the order, Jonathan?
Is it okay if we have Tubman first? Half of us have to leave.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. It's all right. Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay.
Sounds like we have a majority.
Oh, you've thrown a curve.
I know. So Patrick's got to shift gears.
Okay.
So online, the materials, there's a copy of the presentation, and due diligence document volume 5 is on the website. So we'll walk through a quick presentation as Patrick fires it up. So we'll do a little process to date. We'll talk through the Tubman relocation options that are in due diligence volume 5, and then we will receive committee feedback. One of the items in there is what we've called the grounding statements around the relocation options, and these are just sort of like the high-level criteria that set some of the guardrails and parameters. We showed them in the presentation. Just kind of as a refresher, nothing new there, just as a refresher, some things we might want to talk about later. We also have a slide in there that's also in the document that's just a reminder that this committee and staff and board members have looked at a lot of relocation options. I think the list on the matrix is over 20. I think we've actually looked at some more than that, some of them fairly cursory. So all of the options that we have looked at in detail and we've discussed, all the detailed information on that is still in the due diligence document. It's just in the appendices. So if people want to go and reference back to some previous options. With that's what that document, that matrix there is. With that, we'll turn it over and get a community engagement update.
I'm going to actually ask Camille.
Sure. So as I understand it, The process to find Harriet Tubman Middle School a new site has been ongoing, and based on today's due diligence report, we now have a couple of options that have required collaboration with one of our charter schools. And so that being said, we've begun to initiate the process to do some joint engagement with Kairos PDX. What that has looked like is we've sent an initial communication to PPS schools in the area about Portland Public Schools partnering with Kairos on engagement. And then Kairos has also sent via their channels a communication to their school community about joining forces with Portland Public Schools to help to find a new site for Harriet Tubman Middle School. So that is the first in a series of actions that are building our momentum back up to engage publicly in this conversation. So one of the next things that we will do is some press around our partnership, and following that, all of our engagement events that we already have on the calendar for the Center for Black Student Excellence and the ones that we will create moving forward. We'll have the Center for Black Student Excellence, the Harriet Tubman relocation, and the Jefferson Modernization Project all present at the engagement events that we're doing over the next several months. So that is what we are doing on the engagement front.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you, Camille. And Dana White will walk us through our options.
Sure. So there's two options that we're looking at today. Scenario one is Humboldt and with the Jeff South lot. And I put the acreage in here because we also showed Kellogg, so you can kind of see how they compare. We do have utility easements on that south lot we need to figure out. And then also an option with both schools on the Humboldt site. So those are the two options. For a comparable, next slide, please. This is the Kellogg Middle School that we just finished recently. It's 3 stories. It's on 5.8 acres. So you can see how that lays out. I think sometimes it's helpful to visualize how things might look and feel. So you can kind of get a sense of what just shy of 6 acres feels like for a middle school.
If on that one, if you go back there real quick, Patrick, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a right of way that butts into the Kellogg parcel, and then you can almost see continue through right where that basketball court is. You can sort of see if that were to continue through and be a street, it would be fairly similar to what the Humboldt site and then the Jefferson South lot looks like, where the Kellogg takes up the vast majority of the right side of the parcel. That's a full-size middle school. It's a little over 100,000 square feet. And then the left side would be essentially the Kellogg, or excuse me, the Jefferson South lot site, roughly. This actually would be a little bit bigger too, and more rectangular, whereas the Humboldt side is a very odd configuration.
Wonky size. Okay, next. So this is scenario one, and this shows using that south lot, which is what you see on the left side of that screen, for Kairos, and then the current Humboldt lot for Tubman. So that's how that would lay out on those two. Obviously, you would have street in the middle, but those would be next to each other. This does. This would be. They have some small amount of outdoor play area, not a lot. Of course, the south lot has been used by Jefferson in the past, so that would be that would not be there any longer. This gives you a sense of how this would lay out and how this might look. Are there questions about this layout? Anything to add, Dan?
So this is able to use that weird dog leg on the south side to accommodate the parking.
That's what we're
very
looking at.
buildable.
I think that's, and I'm not an architect.
Yeah.
It depends on how this with the city.
We'll see these are really high level, just conceptual
Yeah.
layouts, just to really see, what's possible and what's not possible. And I think with this option, we're looking at the total square footage for middle school, 100 to 120,000 square feet variable. And then we assume 50,000 square feet for Kairos, and that's not going to be exact. There's probably some plus or minuses there. And so we think if we separated the two, we feel pretty confident we'd be able to fit all the indoor academic space that is needed. The outdoor spaces would be pretty significantly compromised.
And what height does this
That there
contemplate fitting that
that
square
shows
footage?
a 3-story.
Three
Kellogg's a
stories.
3-story.
Yeah.
It's pretty tall.
That's pretty tall. And it's in a residential neighborhood too, so. Kairos at 2 stories, Tubman at 3.
And I'll just one more caveat about the layouts. These sites are, one of the sites is split zoned. There's lots of, right of ways that butt into the street. The land use and the building permitting for this would be pretty complex. There's also a lot of utilities and easements out there. So take this all with a grain of salt. This is pretty high level to say, yes, we think this is doable, but there would be trade-offs is the bulk of what to take away.
Okay, the second scenario is putting both schools on the current Humboldt lot where Kairos currently exists. And you can see when we do that, there's a 4-story for Tubman and 2-story, I think, for Kairos. So a little bit of outdoor play, not much, and a small amount of parking. The bus drop, Terry and Lisa haven't seen this, so the bus drop off, I think it's kind of is the best that we can do. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. I'm blind. Oh, 2 stories. Thank you very much, Ron. It's a good thing you're here. So that would preserve the south lot for probably some additional parking and in a shared multi-purpose field. Because this would add probably 1,000 students. Kairos is 250, something like that, to this area with Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go to the next one, these are just some of our benefits and risks that are associated with a partnership in terms of the space. So the benefits, obviously, we're in the Tubman boundary, so that's good. We already own both of those pieces of property, also good. And I know we haven't decided yet where the Institution for Black Student Excellence is going to go, but presumably somewhere around there. Now the risks, of course, are on our outdoor amenities for Jefferson. Jefferson's already very compromised athletically, so this quite honestly makes it worse. And we don't have enough outdoor amenities for the middle school folks there either. So we basically, nobody has any outdoor space. That's kind of how that would end up. And Dr. Proctor, if you have anything that you want to add about the academic side of it, or how this might operate?
Well, you have to go back and say what's so about the previous slide. So what are you saying about the space?
Well, it meets the ed spec, right?
Not for outdoor space,
But for,
we would try to make it meet the indoor ed spec 4 stories if we can.
What are the implications of the size of the building being the way it is?
So we'll look back. We have 2 options on 2 sites, right? If we split them onto the 2 different sites, we think from ed spec a square footage standpoint, we think we could get the interior space on the 2 separate sites. Outdoor needs, parking, bus turnaround, hardscape play areas, grassy play areas, I think those would be very significantly compromised. It'd be significantly less than what we recently constructed at Kellogg. If we try to put them both on the same site, from a math standpoint, it looks like that square footage would work, but we would need to do a lot more exploration, and possibly it would not be able to fit them both on the same parcel. So if you go back to the Kellogg example, just think conceptually, it would be just taking that right portion where the building is, then adding another 50,000 square feet onto that. That would be a pretty significant challenge. We're not saying it's impossible, but it's.
What are the trade-offs? What are the trade-offs I heard you is size, right? So
if you can't fit all the square footage, you would have to reduce square footage.
In classrooms and program offerings?
Yeah.
So
student capacity, classrooms.
or you'd have to go up more. Or is
Oh,
there a hard
yes,
cap, zoning cap on?
I mean, there are, I'll just say, going up isn't always a great option. You don't see a lot of really tall elementary schools
Yeah.
unless you're forced to do it because
Yeah.
it's generally not consider good quality. There's a lot of challenges with supervision and et
Middle
cetera.
schools is what, like, yeah, supervision wise, it's a nightmare. I used to
got it.
supervise a high school that had 5 stories, and the principal and the team struggled with, because as you go up one floor, and this is Philly, so children are a little more rambunctious in Philly. Well, you go up one floor, they're going down the stairwell to the other, and it's like a rat race. But anyway, I think, you know, I mean, it's when we look at that option and the spacing, it really is concerning to consider that it will impact program and academics and the way that we're offering space to children, particularly a school that services a large percentage of children of color. And anytime you do this presentation and you take it back 2 slides to the Kellogg model, then the question then becomes, how come Kellogg gets that? And then when it comes to in a historic Black community that services a majority, if you go forward 2 slides, services a majority of our Black and students of color, why are we, you know, we compromise academically, instructionally, classroom space, programmatic spaces by putting, you know, it's just tight, basically, is what we see. And I think it's evident on the slide.
I would really want to know how much of a compromise, and not necessarily right now, Dr. Proctor, but how much of a compromise do we think this would be if we were to construct this as envisioned here? I get the compromise on the outdoor spaces and the play spaces, but as far as the educational.
I think it's going to be the question of how many classrooms less will we see in the space. And then I do want to speak transparently and say the optics of this, again, when you back it up against a Kellogg model and what we give Kellogg, it's not it just seems tight, and then it seems like we're compromising the space for, and in what classrooms will we lose?
I guess my other question too would be, how does this stack up to our other middle schools, comprehensive middle schools, in terms of square footage for educational spaces and outdoor spaces? Because we do have other middle schools that don't have adequate, that wouldn't meet ed spec for outdoor.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, existing middle schools are all over the place. If you think of Jackson, twice the size, and we've got some other schools that are considerably smaller. If we look at just, let's say, if you want to go back to the other option real quick, Patrick, if we're looking at just the option that is the Humboldt site, that would be the smallest site that has middle school in the district, and without the benefit of, like, Tubman is one of, if not the smallest right now. It's also smaller square footage, and it has a park adjacent to it, so it has that benefit. So this would be considerably more constrained than the existing Tubman site, excluding even the park.
Have we considered that, I mean, do we consider that underground parking is just prohibitively expensive?
Underground parking is very expensive. Going vertical becomes very expensive. Even without those assumptions, this is one of the most expensive options we've looked at so far. So it would definitely be, even the range that we give, if we're going to start looking for parking or going too tall, it's going to be really at the high end of all of the options that we consider. Certainly above the funds that have been provided by the state.
Yeah, I would just be concerned with, you know, classroom space. Do you know how many classrooms would be reduced?
No, I mean, again, this is really conceptual.
But which scenario offers more classrooms?
This scenario offers more, essentially it has Kairos on the Jefferson South lot, so it would allow for more room for Tubman to be built.
It's also 3-story. Tubman is 3-story in the scenario, 4-story in the other
Yeah.
scenario. They've got-
Does a 4-story give you all of the classroom space, or you're saying you're still losing classroom space?
Yeah, I guess I don't want us to focus too much on this because there's a lot of unknowns between this and when you would actually get to construction, including the land use considerations. This is in a residential neighborhood surrounded by 2-story homes. There'd be a lot of considerations if even a 4-story building would be permitted or be allowed. So I don't want to get too far into the details of exact square footage. It's not impossible that we could get all the square footage here, but it's a risk. It's definitely not a guarantee.
Now, in scenario 2 is if you just have the athletic and field spaces on the south lot, does that allow for a full-size multi-use turf field? What is it? Does it end up being
right
like
now
that dinky one at Kellogg?
It's right now or smaller. Right now, it's envisioned as just a multi-purpose field, but not for Jeff, but not a regulation size field.
So like what we have, like an auxiliary field or
Like a practice
like a
field.
U9 or, I mean,
Something like that, yeah, I'm not sure. Dimension.
so it's fine, would be fine for, PE and stuff, but you couldn't really have games there except for little kids.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not really okay.
No,
because
I
we
meant-
don't have any
no, I
very
agree.
good options.
I didn't mean that we were okay. We're in big trouble.
We have a problem to solve.
Yes, we do.
I think also it's worth noting, I'm not, this committee is this committee, but this has not been shared with the Tubman community or the Kairos community. We're still doing engagement or planning for engagement. I don't know, Camille, if you could speak to that. So in other words, outside of this room, there's still work to be done.
Oh, there was a letter that went out, right?
The letter, but we have to have engagement. We're talking about.
We haven't did the concept out, but the engagement letter went out.
We have to have, but the engagement
Yeah,
piece with
that
the
part.
community,
Yeah.
with the families, with the students of the impacted schools really is a part of the process that has not happened yet,
Right.
and it still needs to also happen.
So
Okay.
we're at the feedback part.
Yeah.
So
We're not okay, but we're at the feedback.
yeah, so the main thing is that we want to take out, and I understand everybody's concern, and once again, it just brings me back to the whole deficit mindset versus the abundant mindset. Like, what are the positives? What could the positives be? What could we do here versus what we can't do, and all that stuff. So I would love to start these. If we're going to have conversations on one end, let's try to balance it out with the other end. Like, what is the possibilities? What is if money wasn't an object? What could we do here? Right? We know that neither option is going to the money that we have is going to suffice. So we know we're going to have to go to the bond and look for money for that. Right? That's just a given. Right? So. Yeah.
120 million is a lot. I mean,
But
we have
we're going by
escalation, but
estimates.
Kellogg costs like 72, right? Something like that.
Yeah, Kellogg was
70s.
less than that, didn't have any property to purchase.
But you don't hear either.
Right, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just going by based on the cost estimates they brought here. It's not
What
going
was the
to.
cost estimate? Did I miss
It's
that?
not. They're both. Either one is still going to need
190,
more than
210.
120.
Yeah.
Say it again.
So I'm just saying the cost estimate for either one of these scenarios is still going to be more than the 120. So we're still going to have to figure out the other financial piece of it, which more likely will be part of a bond, unless someone else has some extra money in their account.
And that's primarily because we're talking about, at least in the other scenario for sure. Well, actually in both, we're talking about 2 buildings.
Right.
Well, it's an additional 50,000 square feet. That's
Right.
not in any of the other scenarios.
Right.
Okay. Any other feedback, comments, questions? Is this going to come back? So you guys are definitely confident. We want to talk with the community. Want to see what their. And it's going to be a trade-off, right? It's just there's no other way around it. It's going to be a trade-off. So we're going to go to the community, see what those trade-offs are. you know, speaking from, you know, on the board level, we do not want to compromise the educational piece of this, right? So we have to look at what other compromises can be, and that's what we're going to share with the community of. These are the compromises that we're willing to look at and get their input, and then kind of come back and we give it back to more drawings and all that stuff to see what it could be. So this is just literally just an informational first view of the two options. You know, I don't anticipate us going back to look at any other options. You know, we did that for almost a year now. So the goal is to make this work one way or the other. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Or were you looking for any more specific feedback from us?
I mean, I guess I agree. I think we're all agreeing that we're going to need to get some stakeholder community feedback on these options. I think the things out there is, are there other options or scenarios that the board wants to either revisit?
I just said we're not going to go backward. We're not looking to go find another space.
Well, we have been in a winnowing process, but to your point, Dan, I mean, you know, we're really in a pinch here, which is not to say that we can't create a beautiful solution, but it's challenging.
So that's a no. All right. Well, thank you guys for this. And we'll move on to the next one.
Let's do the supplemental transportation plan. Patrick, you ready? You got it?
I wish I could make it bigger, but.
You need to hit the slideshow.
Yeah, go to slideshow.
There we go. All right.
You're in trouble if I'm giving you tips.
All right.
A little better.
Take it away.
All right. So I'm here to discuss the supplemental transportation plan, and specifically the criteria that informs the supplemental transportation plan. Next slide.
Can I stop you real
Yeah.
quick? Just so everyone knows, so this will be coming to the board for approval, and so we did an overview of this 6 months or so
Yeah.
ago. We kind of want to bring it in chunks, so it's just not like, you know, put on the committee all at once, then to the board. So we want to talk about like the criteria today, then we'll come back with the full plan here in the next month or so, and then we'll go to the board. So it's just a little process overview. Sorry.
Thanks, Dan. Just a quick overview of what the supplemental transportation plan is. Transportation services are mandated for students living on a prescribed distance. Sometimes there are hazards within the prescribed walk boundary that make it necessary to walk more than the prescribed distance in order to get to school, and the supplemental transportation plan identifies these hazardous areas. A supplemental transportation plan is required by the same ORS as the transportation services, and is the mechanism we use to obtain reimbursement for our transportation services within the mandated walk distance boundary. So the supplemental transportation plan defines hazard zones within 1 mile walk boundaries of elementary schools and 1.5 miles of middle schools. Students within a hazard zone are entitled to supplemental transportation, also known as bus service. Let's keep it real. Yep.
The whole page.
Bus service. Yes. Yes. School bus. Okay, so criteria. What does that mean? Criteria defines the best practices and parameters for walking and crossing restrictions that are universal throughout the district. Criteria is based upon available and updatable data from intergovernmental partners and informs the model that outputs the supplemental hazard zones. Operations staff does have the ability to override the data if the real world conditions do not align with the data informing the model. And the criteria and the model have been approved by PPS Student Transportation, Portland Bureau of Transportation Safe Routes to School Management, and Portland Bureau of Transportation Vision Zero Management. And you can see the image here on this slide is the high crash network for the city of Portland. PBOT describes the high crash network as streets that make up 8% of Portland's streets but account for more than half of traffic deaths. And those, you will hear more about high crash network in a little bit here. So the first piece of criteria regards walking. Most of the other criteria is in regards to crossing. Walking is restricted if the speed limit is over 20 miles per hour, or it's within the high crash network and there is no sidewalk or usable shoulder present. So all neighborhood streets in Portland have a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. Students may walk on residential roads without a sidewalk, but if there is a speed limit that exceeds 20 miles per hour, or if a 20 mile per hour road is within the high crash network, there must be a sidewalk or usable shoulder present. In general, if a sidewalk or usable shoulder is present, walking will be allowed. And you can see in the picture here, this is Southeast Thorburn, has a speed limit of 25 with no sidewalk present. Walking would be restricted here. Crossing is restricted when the speed limit is over 20 miles per hour and there are no crossing controls, so no signal and no crosswalk. 20 is plenty is a Vision Zero initiative based on the data that shows a significant improvement in survivability when drivers are driving less than 20 miles per hour. 20 is the speed on all residential roads in Portland. This means students can cross residential roads without crossing controls, but not anything with a speed higher than that. You can see there's a picture of the intersection of Woodstock and 50th Avenue here. There is no signal and no crosswalk. Crossing would be restricted here because Woodstock has a speed limit of 25. Crossing is restricted when the speed limit is over 25. The street is 2 lanes and a 4-way stop or crossing with a signal and a crosswalk is not present. So once we move away from residential neighborhood roads, we require there to be a 4-way stop or a crosswalk as long as the road is only 2 lanes wide. So students are easily able to wait for traffic to stop before crossing. Pictured here, we have the intersection of Burnside and 69th. Burnside has 2 lanes and a speed limit of 30 miles per hour. There is no 4-way stop or crosswalk present. Crossing is restricted here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So does the board have to adopt the STP before you submit it?
Yes.
Is that why we're doing this?
Yes.
Yeah, as part of our process for sending it to the State Board of Education, there needs to be a resolution passed.
Okay, that's what I figured, but I just wanted to check.
Yes.
All right. Next criteria. Crossing is restricted when the speed limit is over 25. The street is more than 2 lanes and a crossing with a signal and a crosswalk is not present. So at this point, 4-way stops, no, are a no, and then any other kind of crosswalk that doesn't have a signal would be no cross. So when the roads widen to more than 2 lanes, just predictability on whether traffic will actually stop without a signal requiring them to is reduced, and therefore crossing is only allowed if a signal that stops traffic and a crosswalk are present. Feedback from the community has shown community concern with students crossing wide roads without any traffic controls. So pictured here, there's a marked crossing on 82nd, which is a 4-lane road with a speed limit of 30. Now, 82nd is within the high crash network, and it actually falls within some criteria that we are going to list after this that would restrict any crossing on this road outside of a marked school zone. However, if a high crash network designation was ever removed from 82nd, they make improvements, we're no longer seeing a bunch of crashes there, this crossing pictured here would still be restricted because there's no stopping traffic there. Crossing is restricted when the road is part of the high crash network. The street is 2 lanes or more and a 4-way stop with a signal and crosswalk is not present. So if a 2-lane road is in the high crash network, crossing is restricted if there isn't a 4-way stop or a signal that crosses traffic. Data has shown that high crash network streets are higher risk for crossing. And you can see here, this is a photo of 92nd Avenue. It's a 2-lane road. Pictured here, there's a marked crosswalk at the Springwater Trail. 92nd has 2 lanes and is designated as part of the city's high crash network. Lack of a signal or 4-way stopping traffic restricts the crossing. Lastly, crossing is restricted if a road is 4 lanes or more in a high crash network. Exception for crossing in a school zone with a crosswalk and traffic controls present. So there's an overwhelming push from the community to not cross students at all on 82nd or Powell. This restriction is a universal rule that applies to those roads, but we could revisit it if those designations changed, like if we were to make improvements and the number of accidents on that road were to decrease. The school zone exception is due to increased visibility by school staff, speed reductions, and also significantly reduces the cost impact of this restriction. Pictured here, we see a signaled crosswalk at Powell and Cesar Chavez. Both Powell and Cesar Chavez are high crash network and have 4 or more lanes. This is not a designated school zone, so crossing is restricted without exception. And lastly, I just want to touch on high schools. So PPS has a waiver with ODE to not provide high school transportation by yellow bus. As part of this waiver, transportation provides TriMet passes for high school students. Yellow bus transportation is provided under certain circumstances where TriMet service is not available. We're working with PBOT to create the infrastructure for defining transportation needs for high schools. However, due to these complexities, high school transportation is not included in the supplemental plan. Currently, PBOT is working on implementing school speed zones at high schools throughout the city. McDaniel is the first on their list.
So how often do you have to turn this in?
It just needs to be kept updated. Our original plan was submitted in 1992. The last update we have on record with ODE is 2002.
Okay. So basically what you're doing is you're just cross-referencing all the changes to the street system in terms of designations and speeds and all that, and then recognizing where that criteria allows for us to make exceptions to our rules and then provide bus service in response to that.
Yeah. With this phase 1, it does not take away transportation from any students. It actually gains transportation.
Yeah.
So Marysville was previously crossing 82nd. They will no longer have to, as well as the Lent students. You know, all of them will now qualify for transportation.
Okay. So will we?
This is Julia.
Where those?
Julia, can I ask a question? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just was asking, will we see where all of our exceptions are?
Yes. Yeah. That's our kind of our next step. We just wanted to bring this piece to you because it just informs so much.
That's awesome. I'm with you.
Sarah, you're gonna have to.
Sorry.
No worries. It just informs so much of that. And we created this really complex model, and this is what we've put in the model to create restrictions in order for the model to output what those zones are. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of this piece before we start presenting the actual zones that we would be providing transportation within the walk area.
Got it.
So for the high school piece, so do we provide the TriMet passes?
We do.
Yes.
And do we provide them free?
Yes.
All students get them, regardless of where they live.
Correct. All high school students attending our comprehensive high schools and a lot of our alternative high schools.
So
But if
explain
you're
comprehensive to them.
McDaniel, Lincoln, all of those that are a neighborhood comprehensive high school.
So like Benson.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Director Brim Edwards.
Yeah, actually, Amy asked the question I was going to ask, and maybe the follow up is like when would that sort of the list of exceptions be or schools be available?
So we are planning on starting to engage with this, to basically engage with the school communities over the next month. And we will provide for them a map with those zones on them. And we're gonna receive feedback from the community on that. And then in March is when we plan on bringing that, just like a really large document with all of that information to you guys.
Is that gonna go to FNO first at end of March
Yes.
and then board?
And that's phase one, right? Which is
That's phase one, which is just the southeast.
Yeah, southeast.
Yeah, it's just the it's just the schools that are in the southeast area that are doing the program balancing in 2023. Because it's so big, we had to break it up into 3 phases, and we really did not want to push off implementing this for those schools because they're going to be experiencing so much change in 2023, and we don't want to say here's more change a year or 2 later. So that's why we're just focusing on those schools for this phase.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for not giving them more uncertainty or continued change. It's really appreciated.
So yeah, keep us posted on where that added services.
Okay.
Like,
You don't want to know anywhere where they're going away. You only want the good news.
it's not going away.
Well, that's
It's not
NCGs
going
in
away.
schools, right? That's only part of the only good news.
All right. Well, thank you so much. All right, next topic.
Okay, last topic. We had a little time on this meeting, so final topic. I think it'll go fairly quick. And so this is to just do an overview of bond planning, really what that process looks like. And there's a short presentation that Patrick's pulling out.
So make sure this is the bond planning process.
Correct.
Yeah, not get into details.
Not get into details.
Just the process.
Just process. I'm happy to answer to the best of our ability a process.
We're going to refer to the board today.
Today, everybody vote.
Okay, just the process. Great.
So I think it's pretty well understood that the district's overall facilities are generally in poor condition with some very notable exceptions. The big picture district plan, capital plan that district's been following since 2012 is to go through and update the entire real estate portfolio over multiple decades via multiple $1 billion via voter-approved general obligation bonds. So the aim has been to target those referrals, those bond votes, to align with U.S. presidential elections, and also to maintain a sustainable funding model so this can continue to go out for a series of bonds. Next slide, please. The bond process is essentially just making a series of decisions that either conform to that overall plan or can deviate from that plan. The board certainly makes those decisions during the bond planning process and makes that decision to refer to voters. The most impactful decisions, the most important ones I would say, is deciding when is the right time to refer a bond to voters. What is the right size of the bond? In other words, how much can the district afford and how much can the community afford? And then what are the district's highest capital priorities that should be in that bond? I assure you that all of them will not be able to be in the next bond. And then the last slide.
1 second. Somebody said what you meant to when we can afford. You said what the school can afford and what?
What the community, what the voters can afford. So they will choose to.
So what part on the PPS side would we have to afford? Wouldn't that all come out of the bond?
Yeah, it's so bonds are debt instruments that are paid off. So it comes down to but it's a decision about how does the district want to finance that debt with the revenue that comes from the bond, which is really important, not just for individual bonds, but also when you have a series of them, right. Decisions around debt financing can impact future bonds.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. I feel like I did.
Your debt rating and the tail that remains from previous bonds.
Exactly. Okay. And the last slide is just to say that the board makes these decisions, but does not make them informed. The staff brings forward all sorts of information that helps support those decisions, facility conditions assessments, community input, polling data, bond financing options, those sort of things that help the board make those decisions. And our goal is to bring those over time. So in a perfect world, these decisions are made very linear, and obviously they one can impact and inform another. But the idea is to bring information over the course of time, really over the next 18 months. We'd like to have the sooner you refer the board, it makes it some other things easier about giving voters an opportunity to understand what is in the scope of the bond. So that, in a nutshell, is what bond planning looks like. I'm sure it will go just as smooth as all that there.
3 times.
No, yeah, I expect maybe 5 or 6 and we'll all be done.
One of the things that I think is missing or could be more explicitly called out in this process, I just lost where I was and I can't remember where I thought it would belong in terms of these slides, but is review previous bond priorities.
Yeah.
So, because it's not specifically stated here, but the more we do this, the more sort of entrenched we are in commitments, and I use that word loosely because no board is committed to any decisions from a prior board, but commitments that we've made to the community about how we're going to continue with the same set of priorities. So I think we really need to highlight that, and it's still an open conversation, but there absolutely are expectations that we will proceed with at least some of the same priorities that we have. For example, finishing the build out of our comprehensive high schools, and we've invested in the master planning process for Cleveland and IDB Wells. So I just think that needs to be really central, that we're not just sitting down and starting from scratch saying what are our highest priorities and what should we invest in.
For sure, yeah, it'll definitely be. It's a good point. It's responsibility of staff to kind of bring those things forward and say, here's the things that we believe are expectations or things that have been talked about before that the board needs to.
And it has come from a community process. Like, these are the priorities and values that the community has brought forward.
Sure, absolutely.
When we go out for a new bond, do we do the whole community engagement piece again, or are we just basing off of the previous community engagement?
Well, we will do community engagement specific to the whatever this bond is, and then ask questions about like timing, size, and are these the right priorities?
Okay. And then also with this, I think this is great. A schedule. So when I see 23, and then going into 24. And if we're looking at doing this in 24, can you put together kind of a schedule of when we should start some of these processes?
Yeah.
Work back.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't want to be too specific because I don't think we've had all those conversations yet, but I agree. I think over the next...
You have one more slide to go. So you only got 4. Yeah, one more slide to go.
I think we want to start having the high-level conversations really now over the next several months to get people up to speed on not just the process, but some of that background information, and then get into the more granular questions. That schedule is fairly big, but I think if the decision is confirmed to go out in November of 24, the next U.S. presidential election, we'll want to make that decision sooner or later, so staff can really put those resources, and everyone in the community can put those resources into that. And then the earlier in 2024 that the decision is made about what exactly that bond package looks like, the better. And there are deadlines for when you have to refer, but those are pretty late. We have to be
it's like July for November. Yeah.
At Amy's point, I just want to mention that I am regularly getting emails from Cleveland and IDB Wells parents saying, when are we going to get our school built?
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. And this is more about the financing. So in some of the conversations we've had around the local option levy and sort of how all the sequencing, our bond advisor has mentioned that longer term depending on the size of the bond and some other factors that we might want to look at a 6-year bond versus a 4-year bond. So I don't know where in the timeline that gets calculated, or it's like we pick the projects and then it just goes make it 6 years versus 4 years. But that's the other thing I want to make sure that we at least have a discussion about the length of it, because I think we have been on this 4-year cycle, and I said the last time we had a conversation with the bond advisor, she mentioned that PPS might want to get on this 6-year cycle versus 4.
Yeah, I'll say I agree. I think, that when does the district refer the bond? What's that right time is really the primary first question.
Right.
So we'll want to include that type of data into the decision-making process around timing.
Yeah, I guess just because I don't want to all of a sudden tonight hear from Ida B. Wells and Cleveland. Just to be clear, I still think this bond goes in 2024. But do you set expectations that it's not then another 4 years, but it's, if the decision were, or the conversation led us to believe that we should have a 6-year bond, then we'd be setting expectation for when the next one is. But I don't want to say that I said we should go in 2026. I'm still thinking 2024, but then the follow-on one, is that a different timing?
I think that's part of the whole conversation when we get down to considerably different level of details, when we see all of our subway tiles and we see the debt that we are carrying into the next one, and we see the cost of the major projects, and we evaluate the need for the smaller projects. And I mean, that's just part of that conversation at the next level.
Well, I think it would be.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it would be a very different expectation. Again, I don't think it should be changed at all for this next cycle, because I think the Ida B. Wells and the Cleveland communities have very much, because the planning money and the process, we believe to go in 2024. But I do think we should have, because I think now people think for sure we're going to go every 4 years. So if we decided to do something differently because that's what the data tells us, or we're being advised that this, as we're referring, we be really explicit about what we're possibly thinking, if it's different from what we've done.
The same amount of money at 6 years as 4, or does that change the?
It's all many different variables.
Oh,
It'd be this same conversation with just one different variable, depending on what we think we can bear, what we need to do, Okay, I'm sorry.
So what I hear is basically one of the next steps is either getting information from you guys to decide when the next bond will come out, or do you need direction from us to find out if we want to go at 24 or.
I think we schedule it for one of the upcoming Facilities and Operations Committee to start having these conversations.
That's just one of many details.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing, this is just me, what I'm hearing is that you need to know at least if we're going to go out for 2024.
Oh, 2024.
Right.
I mean, if the board needs to signal an intention.
Right,
I'm signaling my intention
for
2024.
Okay. Well, I'll go 2024 too.
I think that
Director Brimmer said 2024, so that's 3. We just got to get one more.
I mean, personally, I feel like that's not even on the table, because we have really made that expectation pretty transparent to the community.
All right. Well, that's the direction. So we'll go from there. We're going to go in 2024. Any other direction you need to do?
No, but I think just the plan is we'll want to keep bringing the topic back piece by piece. And
I just wanted the guys.
Meanwhile, Patrick's list just keeps growing.
I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that we bring that 2024 and we can move forward. All right. Any other questions, comments? Good for the order.
Thank you.
All
nice
right.
facilitation, Chair Hall.
We are adjourned.
Out of here.
Thank you.
5 o'clock.
Thank you.